2 of the lesson 13 on the influence of early attachments on childhood and adult relationships. So just to show you where we're at in the specification, it's the last bullet point. So we are looking at the influence of early attachment, including the role of an internal working model. And we set this up in the last part of the lesson, just talking about what an internal working model was and how it's a mental representation which we carry with us and they affect our future relationships. So it's like a template for future relationships. Sometimes it's referred to as the continuity hypothesis. So on the last session, I asked you to look at this research by Hazen and Shaver and find out about this study, and if possible carry out the love quiz, which I will try to show you the next time I see you in class. So Hazen and Shaver asked readers, around 620 people, to complete a questionnaire on their attitudes towards love. They were then asked to complete a 3-part questionnaire. So if you notice, the 3 parts are looking at different aspects of relationships. The participants were then required to read 3 paragraphs and to reflect on their history of romantic relationships in order to select which 3 descriptions had best summed up their general experience of relationships. So the findings. So the findings are actually very, very similar to those of Ainsworth's, because again, the findings do look at those 3 attachment styles, and therefore the findings we're going to go back to and use those attachment styles again. So the first finding is securely attached infants trusted their mothers and generally went on to have relatively normal adult relationships. Insecure avoidant and insecure resistant displayed signs of being uncomfortable and not being able to trust their mothers, and therefore they took this into later relationships. So insecure avoidant adults were very uncomfortable being close to others. If you'd like to add a little bit more in with this, insecure avoidant children in romantic relationships tend to avoid love and tend to avoid commitment. So they will go from relationship to relationship and perhaps having lots of short-term partners and not really wanting to settle down. And they probably don't talk in terms of love. They're probably more likely to talk in terms of sex because it avoids those deep and intimate sort of feelings. Insecure resistant, on the other side, are really possessive and are likely to get very, very hurt very easily in relationships. And they will talk about love and they will fall in love a lot. And they will want to have very intense relationships. So those 3 attachment styles do have 3 very different effects in later relationships. We've already looked at it in terms of bullying, but now if you think about it in terms of romantic relationships. So the conclusions are that the early attachments do have a huge effect on romantic experiences, and in some cases it's associated with negative outcomes in later relationships. And obviously there is some suggestion here that the timing of these relationships really, really matters. So if we now go to have a look at the research and what are the problems, I would like you to identify and have a look at what some of the issues might be with that. So first of all, we've used an interview and a questionnaire. I want you to think about some of the issues surrounding that and why they both might be a problem, and think about it in terms of bias, in terms of social desirability bias, but also in terms of subjectivity and in being honest, if you like, because people are not probably going to want to open up and they're going to want to present themselves in the best light. And also a lot of people, if they're talking about romantic relationships, they don't want to admit to having qualities such as being possessive, such as being insecure, those kind of things. So think about why that might be a problem and therefore what the effects of that are going to be, and they're going to obviously reduce the validity of the research. Fail to consider temperament. So what that means is some children are born naturally quite aggressive, quite temperamental, if you like, and this doesn't consider it at all because it only really looks at the early attachment styles. So there is a bit of a weakness there because it doesn't actually consider the biological side. It also fails to consider free will. This implies that people and children do not have a choice at all over the way that they react. So the idea being that if their parents have been a certain way, they don't have a choice about the way that they carry on in later relationships. And that's actually not true because people do have the ability to change and they do have free will and they can decide not to go down the route that their parents have and try to change that. And we know that through looking at cognitive behavioural therapy. So just think about some of the three main problems of this. So if you would like now to have a look in your attachment booklet, and this is page 41, and we've got the love quiz there in a little bit more detail, and we've got again talking about exactly where it was printed and exactly what was done in the research, and then we've got a little bit more detail on the findings, which I will just go through again. So secure, make sure that you're able to understand what the pattern is for securely attached children in love relationships. So for example, happy, trusting, accepting their partner regardless of faults. So realizing that they're comfortable with somebody and they are happy to accept that there might be problems and faults. They understand that there is an initial passion, but it will develop into this kind of romantic love. They're able to be close to others, they're able to be trusting, and so on. Insecure, resistant, often very obsessive. Desire for reciprocation, which as you know means desire for somebody to be exactly the way that you are. Emotional highs and lows. And we've got this extreme sexual attraction and jealousy, and the constant worry that partners don't love them or might abandon them. And this intense closeness does frighten others away. And remember, the reason for this, according to this theory, is based on that initial relationship with the main caregiver. So an insecurely resistant child, according to this theory, won't be able to help being like this in a relationship. Insecure avoidant types fear intimacy. They avoid emotional highs and lows. They believe they don't need love. They talk about being okay to be on their own. They're constantly saying that they're happy to be alone. They do find it uncomfortable opening up to people and being close. So these are some more detailed findings now if you would like some numerical findings. So when analysing these self-report histories, Hazen and Shaver found that 56% of respondents were classified as secure, 25% as insecure avoidant, and 19% as insecure resistant. So this is a high correlation between attachment types and adult romantic love styles. But please remember, it's not a cause and effect. So we are not saying that what happens in early life causes this to happen later. So the conclusion was there is evidence to support the concept of an internal working model having a lifelong effect, but they did concede that some people do change as they grow older. So what are some of the behaviours that might influence the internal working model? Well, first of all, we've got, and I'm not sure I like the wording of this, but this is taken from one of the main textbooks, poor parenting. But what we could argue is not necessarily poor parenting, but parenting that isn't perhaps as sensitive as it could be. And we know this because of Harlow's research. So we've got some research to support the idea of if you don't have an internal working model, the individual doesn't have a reference point. And if you think about a lot of those monkeys in Harlow's research, they went on to be aggressive and unable to form relationships and often attacked their own offspring and even killed them. And I'm not suggesting that that would happen in humans, but the point being that there is clearly some importance of that lack of early attachment. Childhood friendships. There's a study referred to as the Minnesota Child-Parent Study, and it found a continuity, which means the attachment styles continue into childhood. So infants who were securely attached were viewed as being more popular, generally less isolated, and having more empathy. And again, the idea being that they do have a secure attachment in early life and they go on to be more trusting. We also know that there is a link or a correlation between attachments during the critical period and later mental health, which is quite interesting. And children who do show some kind of attachment disorder, perhaps disinhibited attachment, have an inability to interact and relate to others. So we often have later experiences of treating others with neglect and not looking after others as well as they perhaps should because of early experiences. Some of the evaluation here, and I apologise it says AO2, it should say AO3. Let me just find, sorry, this should say AO3. This is some of the evaluation of this now, and obviously if you want to have a look and create some peel points out of this, the first being the method of questionnaire, and we've got some issues surrounding questionnaire, surrounding bias, but also talking about the idea of it being retrospective data. Sometimes if you think about going back to your childhood, we have a memory of a memory, so we don't always remember exactly as it is. So just remember that, and therefore there are problems with accuracy, and the memories aren't totally accurate because a lot of our memories are memories of memories. All of this research is correlational, so we're not saying that there's a cause here. So the point being that there could be a completely different cause to later love styles, so please remember not to rule that out. And we've got determinism here, the idea that people do have some free will, and this research unfortunately suggests that some people are doomed in their later relationships, that if they've not had a happy relationship with their parents, they're going to have constant, should I say, problems in later life. And that's just not the case, because people can change this. So please remember that as well. There is some other supporting research if you want to use it, although it's not something that I usually teach because I don't feel that you actually need this. I think it is going over the top a little bit. And then we've got some questions here which you can practice with. And if you just have a quick look at this question here, outline one study, it does say on attachment and adult relationships, sorry, on childhood and adult relationships. And really, though you could choose a study on perhaps bullying or the Hazen and Shaver Love Quiz, it doesn't really matter which one you choose there. And again, the evaluation of research, in this, the easiest research would be to evaluate Hazen and Shaver's Love Quiz. If you want to have a go at any of these questions. And then just to show you, if we go right down to the bottom of the booklet, so if we go right to the, I put this in because it was distance learning and I wanted to make sure that you had some activities if you wanted to carry these out, particularly over the summer. If you want to have a look at activity 1, which, let me just have a look at what page this is. If you want to have a look at this, it's on page 60. There is an activity here that you can carry out, and if you want to send it to me or talk it through with me, we've got a little bit of a stem here, and then we've got asking you to refer to Kagan's research on what this suggests for the continuity hypothesis. So if you have any questions, please get back to me, and I will see you in class hopefully tomorrow.